But you, O God, do see trouble and grief. You consider its take in hand. The victim commits himself to you. You are the helper of the fatherless. Psalm 10:14 never held any truth to me until a few years ago. Growing up, I never understood how a God so loving and a God so merciful could take my father away from me. I'm Holly Renner, and this is my story. I was 6 years old and walked down the stairs one day in my house in Ohio, and I saw my dad at the bottom of the stairs, his head in his hands, and he was crying, and saw my mom in the distance, and she was pacing back and forth. She was just crying, and I saw my brother Todd, my sister Jennifer, just so bewildered and so confused as to what was going on. And I went up to my dad, and he hugged me, and he said, "Honey, I love you. It's gonna be okay, I love you." And he gave me a hug. Little did I know that would be the last time I would see my father for the next 6 years. My parents got divorced, and my mom remarried immediately. So, with the car packed up, we moved. We drove to Florida and never looked back. And so, we got to Florida, we got to the house, and this big, tough Marine covered in tattoos from head to foot answered the door. And the only thing that I could do was run behind the car and hide, and I was mortified of who this man was. I had no idea. This man, Mick Goff, was my new father. Boy, did he love us. He loved Todd, Jennifer, and myself like his own children. He loved my mother with a love that just ran so deeply, and he just became that father figure that I so desperately longed for. Because my dad, when I was growing up before my parents got divorced, he was never there. I would always just run after him and ask him if we could play, and he just didn't care. He was always emotionless and never gave me the time of day, and so I always felt rejected by my father. So having Mick take that role was so awesome and so important in my life. Right before high school, 8th grade, I was 13, I made it my goal in life to be popular, to be accepted. I didn't want to be the girl who was made fun of anymore. I was sick of it. I was sick of that girl. And so, dyed my hair bleach blonde and started drinking and started swearing and began to become extremely rebellious at home. And I would swear at my mom and yell at her all the time until I hated her. And it was just horrible to Todd and Jen and Mick. And I was just embarrassed that I didn't have the cookie cutter family with my real dad, who had a good job, wore a suit, who came home and picked up his little girl. I didn't have that life, and I was envious of all my friends who did. So I was just ashamed of my family. I didn't feel like we were normal, and so I began to just delve into this world of sin and this world that I thought and hoped would fill these voids in my heart, but they didn't, and they never did. And so I went on to high school freshman year, and there were 4,000 kids in my high school, and there were so many different possibilities that lay before me. So I took the route of rebellion. And I started clubbing. I started going out to clubs with my friends. I would dance on the bar. I would just wear the tightest clothes I could. I would kiss random guys that I didn't even know. I didn't know who they were, because I needed that approval. I needed that acceptance. I needed to feel beautiful. And if everyone was staring at me, and then I felt beautiful. Just went further and further into that. Little did I know that Mick was going through his own hell. And I was too selfish to see. I was too self-absorbed to care. But he had extreme post-traumatic stress disorder from Vietnam. His head was still in the war. He was an injured vet, so he was in a lot of physical pain, but we couldn't afford medical insurance at the time. And so he turned to alcohol and pain prescriptions, and he abused both of those. And so I would just come home, 14 years old, and I would just always see Mick inebriated. That was all I knew. He was never sober. And so this man that I had grown to care about so deeply was slipping away from us. So I just separated myself completely from my family. I wanted nothing to do with them. One day I woke up to the most gut-wrenching scream I have ever heard. And I ran into my mom's room and she was shaking and she was holding this letter. It said, "I'm so sorry, but I feel like I'm more of a burden than a help. I'll be your guardian angel, Mick." So it was his suicide letter. So I called the police. They found him and he was alive, but he had cuts all over his arm and he just wasn't speaking, and my mom rushed him to the hospital, but they said, "Jane, there is nothing wrong with Mick. He's fine. He is mentally stable. There's nothing we can do for him. There's nothing we can do for your family. We have to release him." So they released him, and this to this day I'll just never forget this week. I just would look at Mick and ignore him. And Mick called my mom and said, "Jane, I love you," and I hung up on her. And she immediately knew what was happening. He turned off his phone and she knew he was going to hurt himself, and so she called the police and they rushed over and broke through the front door. And at the same time, Mick was walking out of the bedroom with a gun to his head. And Todd was chasing after him, saying, "Mick, don't do it. Don't do this to us. Please, don't do this." Mick just ignored him, and the police grabbed my brother and shoved him up against a wall. And they escorted him out into the driveway. And Mick went out into the golf course, into the backyard. I have a feeling that the sound of the gunshot will never leave Todd's memory. Mick shot himself. And I found out a couple hours later, my best friend was chasing me. Holly, answer the phone. It's for you, please take it." And I just kept running, and I was ignoring her, and she finally caught up to me, and I took the phone, and my sister was on the other line. There was silence. She was crying, and she said, "Holly, I love you. It's gonna be okay. Mick's gone. He's dead. He killed himself." And as the phone dropped to the ground, I fell with it. I never got the chance to say thank you so much, Mick, for being a daddy to me. Thank you so much for loving me and Todd and Jennifer. Thank you so much for loving my mom the way a man should love his wife. Thank you for the impact that you made on me. Can never explain the pain that you go through losing someone that you love. That the only man that I loved was just ripped away from me, and I didn't understand why God was doing this, why he not only took my real dad, but he took my stepdad. So I felt alone, and it was my new life goal to never go through that agony again, to never go through something that excruciating. So I put up walls and pushed my mom away. I pushed my family away, and I wasn't there for my mom. I continued down the path of verbal abuse. I would just yell at her and say that I wish that she had died instead of Mick, and I wasn't the daughter that I should have been. I had never grown up seeking God, but my mom would always try to talk to me about him. So she would write me these 20-page letters about his love, and slowly I began to realize there had to be a God. There was more. And so July of 2004, we sat in this musky hotel room, and I said, "Mom, I want your Jesus. I want what you have. I want the freedom that you have, the joy that you have." So I accepted him into my life, and from that point, my life has been totally turned around. My old life is dead to me. I'm not the girl I used to be, but I am a woman who is redeemed, who has been forgiven, who has been called to a purpose. I'm a woman who is worthy of love, who is worthy of the Father's love. And Jesus has really taken the role of a father, and so regardless of the fact that my dad was never there, the fact that Mick abandoned us, I knew and I held on to the hope that Jesus was my new father, that he was always there, that he never abandoned me, that he never will abandon me. And so to this day, I want to speak that same hope into other girls who feel hopeless, who don't feel beautiful, who don't feel worthy, who are fatherless. I want to speak truth into their life, knowing that there's a way out. There was a way out for me, there's a way out for everyone. So Psalm 10:14, he sees us in the midst of our pain, and he is the father of the fatherless. I now understand those words, and I now hold those words so dearly. I have been redeemed.
I will live by the grace that you offer so freely.